Have you ever wondered why good people suffer while others seem to escape unscathed? Today, we delve into the story of Job, a man who experienced profound suffering despite his righteousness. Welcome to a tale that unfolds more than 2 millennia ago in the lands of Uz, a tale that has sparked countless discussions, philosophical debates, and theological inquiries over the centuries. The question of suffering and justice, a question that is as old as humanity itself, yet remains as relevant today as it was in the times of Job. Our protagonist, Job, is introduced in the Bible as a man of impeccable character. Job 1 describes him as blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. He was a man who had it all: wealth, a loving family, respect in his community. Yet he was about to face suffering that would shake the very foundations of his faith. Why do righteous individuals like Job endure hardship and suffering? And why does it seem that those who live without regard for others often escape without a scratch? These are the questions we grapple with, questions that have puzzled philosophers, theologians, and ordinary folk alike for centuries. As we delve into Job's story, we'll see him stripped of everything he holds dear: his wealth, his family, his health, all swept away in a series of catastrophes that leave him sitting in ashes, covered in sores, questioning the very nature of justice and suffering. But this isn't just a story of suffering, it's a story of resilience, of faith tested to its limits, and of a conversation with God that reveals profound truths about the nature of suffering and justice. So, let's begin this journey together, delving into the ancient texts, exploring the depths of Job's story, and seeking answers to our questions about suffering and justice. Let us embark on this journey, exploring the depths of Job's story and seeking answers to our questions about suffering and justice. Job's story begins in a time of prosperity. He was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and shunned evil, but soon his life took a turn for the worse. Residing in the land of Uz, Job was a man of great stature and prosperity. His wealth was immense, his family large and loving, and his heart full of reverence for God. He was blameless and upright, a man who feared God and shunned evil, as the scriptures tell us in Job 1:1. One day, a heavenly council was held. The angels gathered before God, and among them was Satan. God, proud of his servant Job, highlighted his righteousness. But Satan, the adversary, questioned Job's integrity. He proposed that Job was faithful only because God had blessed him abundantly. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan asked in Job 1:9. He suggested a test: take away Job's blessings and his faith would surely falter. God agreed to this test, allowing Satan to take away Job's possessions and children, but not to harm Job himself, as stated in Job 1:12. What followed was a series of misfortunes that befell Job. His livestock were stolen, his servants killed, and his children perished when a mighty wind struck the house they were in. This was a test of faith like no other. Job, who had lived a life of prosperity and virtue, was suddenly stripped of everything he held dear. He was left alone, with his wealth gone, his children dead, and his world turned on its head. Yet, in the depth of his despair, Job did not curse God. He fell to the ground in worship, uttering the words, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." These are the words of Job in 1:21, showing his unwavering faith in God despite his trials. Job's life was turned upside down. But how did he respond to these trials? Let's find out. Despite the catastrophic loss, Job's faith remained unshaken. His response to suffering was remarkable. In the heart of the tale, we find Job in the throes of unimaginable pain, a testament to human suffering. His world has crumbled. He's lost his wealth, his children, and his health. Yet, Job's response is something quite extraordinary. As we delve into the second chapter of the book of Job, verses 1 through 10, we find a man who, despite his sorrow, clings to his faith. As his wife implores him to curse God and die, Job's response is not one of anger or resentment, but of profound understanding of the nature of existence. In Job 2:10, he poses a question that resonates with us all. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? These are not just words of a man in despair, but the wisdom of a man who understands the duality of life. They are words that reach out and touch the core of our being, encouraging us to reflect on our own responses to the trials we face in our lives. Job's words remind us that life is a balance of joy and sorrow, of triumph and despair. And in accepting this, we can find a way to navigate through our own hardships, just as Job did. Job teaches us that it's not about the suffering itself, but how we respond to it. Job's faith was not dependent on his circumstances or the blessings he received. His faith was a part of him, unyielding and steadfast. It was this unwavering faith that allowed him to accept his suffering without losing sight of his belief in God. In the face of adversity, Job didn't falter. He didn't question God's justice or goodness. Instead, he accepted his suffering, acknowledging it as part of the human experience, as part of life itself. Job's unwavering faith in the midst of suffering is a lesson for us all, but his trials were far from over. Job's friends came to comfort him, but their words only added to his distress. A trio of companions, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, entered the scene, their hearts heavy with the sight of their friend's suffering. Their dialogues with Job, spanning from chapter 2 to 31 of the book of Job, present a fascinating discourse on suffering and its implications. Eliphaz, the Temanite, was the first to speak. He suggested that suffering is a result of sin, believing that a just God would not allow an innocent man to suffer. In his words, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Job 4:7. His argument was based on the principle of retribution, a common belief in ancient cultures where good deeds are rewarded and evil ones punished. Next, Bildad the Shuhite made his case. He too believed in retribution, but also introduced the concept of divine justice. He argued that if Job's children had sinned, they received their just deserts, and if Job were truly righteous, he would be restored by God. His perspective echoed in his words, "When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin." Job 8:4. Lastly, Zophar the Naamathite spoke. He took a more hardline approach, suggesting that Job's suffering was a mere fraction of what his sins deserved. His harsh words reflected his belief, "Know this, God has even forgotten some of your sin." Job 11:6. These friends, in their attempts to comfort Job, ended up adding to his distress. They assumed he must have sinned to deserve such suffering, which contradicted Job's righteous identity. But Job didn't waver. He rejected their explanations and maintained his innocence. He yearned for a chance to plead his case directly to God, believing in his justice. Job's friends offered their own explanations, but Job remained steadfast in his faith. His conversation with God would bring more clarity. The discourse on suffering between Job and his friends paints a vivid picture of man's struggle to understand the divine plan and the nature of suffering, but it's Job's unwavering faith that sets the stage for the divine discourse to follow. God finally spoke to Job not to explain his suffering, but to reveal his sovereignty. In the heart of the storm, God addressed Job, and what an address it was. As recorded in the book of Job, chapters 38 to 41, God didn't provide a straightforward explanation for Job's suffering. Instead, he presented a grand tour of the universe, emphasizing the mystery and majesty of his creation. God's discourse ranged from the foundations of the earth to the storehouses of the snow, from the constellations in the skies to the wild beasts of the field. He reminded Job of the sheer complexity and wonder of the world, asserting his absolute control over everything in it. Job, in his suffering, had questioned God's justice. Yet in this divine conversation, Job was reminded of God's incomprehensible wisdom and power. Job's story shows us that suffering is complex and often beyond human understanding, but it also teaches us about the sovereignty and justice of God. Job's story ended not in despair, but in restoration. This turn of events, found in the 42nd chapter of the book of Job, verses 10 through 17, is a profound demonstration of God's mercy and justice. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes, giving him twice as much as he had before. Job's faith, which had been tested and shaken, was ultimately vindicated. He received a new family, 7 sons and 3 daughters, and lived to see his descendants for 4 generations. His latter days were blessed more than his beginning, living a further 140 years. Job's story is not just about suffering, but about restoration and redemption. It underscores the abiding truth that even when life seems grim and all appears lost, God's justice will prevail. Job's story is a testament of unwavering faith in the face of suffering. It reminds us that even in our darkest hours, God's justice prevails. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up. It's a small gesture, but one greatly appreciated. Become a part of our growing family and subscribe to our channel. May God bless you in all your endeavors. Thank you for watching.